they have given up some big plays this year.
That is a first down reception. The rarely used tight end, Tyler Higbee.
Stop. Let's watch that again. That play. That play right there. When 193-pound Jaire Alexander met a 243-pound Tyler Higbee in a head one-on-one match and threw him to the sideline with the absolute most malice intent. That play right there was when I knew he would be a GOAT. That's right, all the way back when he first joined, all the way back in 2018, I knew he would be a GOAT. GOAT recognized GOAT after all. Now that I'm finally doing this whole YouTube thing, I figured I'd like to cover some of my favorite players. Jaire is definitely in the top 10, maybe even top 5 of my all-time favorite players. But the reasons for that are more than what he just puts on the field. First off, he's got a great personality. He's humble, yet confident. To me, a dude is kind of a scrub if he has absolutely zero confidence in himself. It's annoying, and since they have such a hard time making decisions, they tend to just kind of get in the way. But if you're on the complete opposite side of that spectrum and being too confident, I also see a problem with that. To me, someone who's too overconfident doesn't want to learn. It doesn't think they need to learn. They never think they're wrong, even when they have evidence right in front of their face. Just two people I don't like to be around. Jaire is perfectly in the middle. He'd be the type of dude to say, I'm the best on the field, but I'm saying that humbly, and I got more to learn. And as backwards as that sounds, I think he would truly mean it if he actually said that. Because from what I could see from his interviews, he's a very upfront guy. He knows himself, and he takes himself seriously. But not to the point where he can't just joke around or be kind of goofy with his news reporters or his teammates. Besides his personality, he's also a great teammate. And by that I mean he shows great leadership. He not just pushes himself, but his squad to be the very best in the league. He even helps out on the other side of the ball, tutoring young wide receivers, and even helps out the team by playing as a scout wide receiver, which helps them immensely since they're low on players due to COVID and injuries. I think it's especially cool that he's doing that since he doesn't really need to try that hard thanks to that huge extension in pay bump. Outside of what he does on the field, he also seems to be a very nice guy, as he not just gives back to his community, but interacts with his community via his yoga sessions. Overall, he just seems like a good person and citizen. But we aren't here just to talk about what makes a good person. Whoa. Let's back up a bit. I think Jaire is a beast on the field, honestly the best at what he does. But I personally don't think that's why I like him so much. For instance, Antonio Brown is a prodigy in of himself, and I personally don't like to listen to him. I don't even like to watch him play. As I said before, I think it's Jaire's demeanor, his work ethic, and sticking true to his own beliefs that got him to where he is today. I like his demeanor, his confidence, and his humility, and I especially like his skills. So today we're going to cover all that and more, and see why Jaire is the best of the best and will be a future Hall of Famer. Let's get into it. Jaire Alexander was born in 1997 in Philadelphia. His origin came from very humble and tough beginnings. When he was a boy, him and his family faced a lot of money problems, with dad saying that they had to move schools a couple times because of their financial situations. And not just school, but also their living quarters. They even had to move the family back in with grandma at one point, which that right there would already be having kids going through something. Never being able to form any real or meaningful connections with kids his age, that would have a huge impact on any kid's psyche, including our goat Jaire, and that probably even caused him to stop trying to make friends because as soon as he would get to know them, he'd have to leave. This I think put into his mind that he really needed to be a dog on his own because all the bonds and friendships he knew he had would at some point end, and he could only rely on himself to get by. Which, I mean, yes, he had his family too, but you get what I mean. That is not the only hardship he had to face, however. It would have to come to terms with another tragedy, being a heartbreaking loss of his baby brother Nadir. Nadir died when he was only 8 months old due to prune belly syndrome, a condition in which a baby is born without muscles in his abdomen. Jaire had to deal with this all at the ripe age of 3, and to this day he still carries that burden, and has a tattoo that has Nadir's footprints and handprints on him. This was fundamental to Jaire, and as his father says, Jaire still carries somewhat guilt, being able to do what he does and knowing his brother never could. I think this was big for Jaire, especially as a kid to see a loss such as that, losing your baby brother, seeing your parents cry, a whole family shattered. To me, I think this is where Jaire's future kindness came from. I think it showed him just how valuable life is and that it shouldn't be taken for granted. And the people that you care for should be treated with the utmost love, as much as you could put out, because you never know if you'll ever get that opportunity again. Just overall, so many lessons to be learned at such a young age for Jaire. When Jaire's family finally did manage to land on their feet, they landed in North Carolina, Charlotte, and this is where his football story truly began. And when he finally touched the field of athletics, surprisingly, it wasn't even for football, but rather baseball at the Boys and Girls Club. It was only after seeing a sign for a football sign-up while driving with his parents to school was when he decided to finally take the initiative and asked if he could join. And the rest is history. In Jaire's words, he adapted to the game very quickly, and just as quick grew a love for the sport, and already as a kid, had the belief that he was one day going to go to the NFL. He quickly grew his prowess and skill as he got older, but once again had to move, and transferred in between sophomore and junior year from West Charlotte High, which by the way, I looked everywhere for his stats, but there was nothing. He literally didn't even have a profile pic on the account. But with that team record, shoot, I wouldn't want my face on that either. He then transferred to Rocky River High School, which Jaire referred to as a relatively unknown startup school, which he isn't wrong, as it was started in 2010. So when Jaire started to play there, it was exactly 3 years old. Anyways, once he did start to play at Rocky Rivers, he started to convince more than just himself that he was going to make it to the league. Willie Sight Jr. was one of the first coaches to meet the new transfer, and he could already start noticing his talents. In his words, he even stated that, and I quote, "He was the first player who I thought legitimately had a shot to play in the NFL." And as he himself was a 15-year veteran coach to say that, when I'm sure he's made plenty of other connections with other players, and has seen all kinds of other talent, to me that statement definitely means something. Yet the talent he saw was not for the current position that Jaire was waiting for. What I mean by that is Jaire at first started to play as a wide receiver back in West Charlotte, and when he transferred, that was still his current position, and apparently he was a good wide receiver, but in his coach's words, he was a good wide receiver, but could become a great cornerback. Now this could be because they already had starting wide receivers, but obviously the coach had to have seen something in him since he went on to play as a professional cornerback. Anyways, Jaire obviously fought back, and I don't blame him. I mean, you gotta imagine, this kid has been playing since he was a child. He probably tried every position in the book and decided that he felt most comfortable with wide receiver. Plus, in a kid's head, they're the cool players. They get to make the big plays, the cool catches, and they get to win the games. Plus, they get to be a bit more flashy, especially when they make cool touchdown dances. Plus, already in his junior year, I bet he cultivated a way to play wide receiver and was making it his own. Now to show up in a completely different school, being told to scrap the entire idea by a brand new coach probably didn't sit too well. But the coach told Jaire basically as it was, and asked him if he wanted to make real money playing this game. So after a bit, the coach did manage to get through to him and convinced him to switch, or at the very least give full-time corner and part-time wide receiver a shot. He was very quick to get used to his new position, and I partly believe that came from already knowing the wide receiver and corner position very well. To beat your enemy, you have to know your enemy and understand how your enemy works and operates. So I'm sure he already had a good handle on what a cornerback does, and he definitely already knew what a wide receiver does. This all leads me to his high school stats at Rocky River. This man was truly a jack of all trades and was a Swiss Army knife of the team, playing on all sides of the ball, including special teams, that involved him being a punter, which I think once again comes from when he wasn't given any opportunities at all. His junior year in terms of offense was decent, with his only real impressive stat being a receiver racking 464 yards in 14 games, but with only 2 touchdowns to show for it. But keep in mind, this was him as a part-time wide receiver, and what I think showed a glimpse of a promising future was of his defensive capabilities, where in 14 games he totaled 37 solo tackles and 11 assists, which equated to 48 tackles in total. Which is an impressive stat, but what really shined was his interceptions. You see, transferring from a somewhat crappy school in terms of sports of course has its disadvantages, but it also has some advantages as well, if you're willing to be up for it and be that guy. What I mean is people will probably underestimate you and will try to test you, and if you are someone like Jaire, that's perfect, because that means you can show what you got, and boy did he. He got 7 interceptions in 14 games, and used those moments to the best of his capabilities, which meant returning yards for 129 yards. Not to mention the amount of passes he deflected, which was 14 that season. You also cannot forget to mention the special teams, as he was an active punter and active returner as well, doing kickoff and punt returns, which in total equated to 646 yards. After the season was over, this man had the whole town buzzing. Rightfully so, since he brought them to their first ever conference championship. He garnered a whole lot of support, but once again, it was not just because of his ability to play. He even at a young age showed true leadership. From an article, one teammate puts it, "Everybody sees Jaire doing well. His leadership motivates the team and everybody to work hard." That quote came from the quarterback himself, the man who's supposed to have that role. But that just shows what kind of energy Jaire brings to the table. You can already tell by the interview, the way he answered the questions, that he already had not just the leadership trait down, but the confidence too. He wanted to play in the big leagues, and to him that meant playing with the best of the best in the SEC. To get there, however, would require an insane amount of work as well as results. This next year would be the decider to show if he has what it takes to get where he wants to go. Whatever this man was doing, he was doing right, and his Swiss Army knife capabilities came to a spot once again where they couldn't be ignored. To start off with his offense in terms of rushing, he went 149 yards in just 14 touches, which equates to around 11 yards per carry. In receiving, this man absolutely blew up, and in 76 passes, he got around 1,229 yards. That averages to about 16 yards per carry after the catch. Not to mention, he also got 20 touchdowns, which is outlandish compared to last year. And by the way, he was only still doing wide receiver part-time. For defense, in terms of solo tackles, he only went down to 33 and only needed 3 assists, and his interceptions also went down to just 4. However, his pass deflection did rise. For a cornerback, these kinds of stats can be especially challenging because sometimes the lack of interceptions is not due to the lack of talent, but often means the offense knows better than to try to test you. He was also pretty good on special teams too, and one time while returning, he returned the ball for a touchdown. Though these special team stats may seem insignificant, when you put them all together in all-purpose yards, along with passing yards, rushing yards, and interception yards, equates to 2,078 yards his senior year. Plus, though you cannot just credit Jaire for this, their team only allowed 2 opponents to go over 21 points their entire season. He also helped lead his team deep into the playoffs when just last year they won their first ever conference championship. And with such a young school, that is quite the feat. It once again just shows how well these kids were responding to Jaire's leadership, along with the coaching staff, which ultimately led him to do something I doubt most would have even saw coming. Honestly, it's kind of ironic how coaches pushed him to be more of a full-time cornerback and a part-time wide receiver, and he still got more receiving yards than the full-time wide receivers. I just find that kind of funny. As awards go, after his senior year, he was selected to the Shrine Bowl of the Carolinas and was ranked the 5th best player in the state of North Carolina by Scout.com and number 22 by Rivals.com. Yet surprisingly, he had very few offers. To be blunt, many saw him as short. My 5'10 Kings don't listen to the haters. But with a 4.6 40-yard dash, he really had nothing to wow the coaches with his physical prowess. But it's not like he didn't try. This man attended many camps from North and South Carolina. And one time he went to try out at a Nike football training camp, but in Jaire's words, he said it did not go well. He competed against a lot of 5-stars, people with the right genetics, the right ties to the NFL, and all the coaches' interests. And as a 160-pound, 5'10" guy, it was just him, no connections, and with only 2 years of real game footage at a relatively unknown, young startup school. To be put up against all that experience, talent, and competitors, it's pretty easy to say that the odds were stacked against him. Even so, he still managed to get some interest from some schools and got an offer to come try out at camp at Louisville. Sadly, however, initially Jaire missed their training camp, so the program thought Jaire wasn't interested, so they had to move on. After that, a lot of mid-school started gunning for him, and he figured he'd have to settle, which he did, for the Charlotte 49ers, because at the time, he figured he shouldn't push his luck. But his belief showed through, and in an inspiring quote from the GOAT, "No, not me, Jaire. It's not about how you look at your situation. It's about what you do to get out of that situation." Which I love that right there, because Jaire is right. No matter the situation, you do not need to lie to yourself about how it looks, because the situation won't change regardless of how you think about it, good or bad. Instead, it's the plan forward with that situation that matters. That is exactly what Jaire did. Through trying, and more trying, he finally managed to get South Carolina to notice and give him an offer. Yet this recruitment story still does not end here. Though Alexander did great as a wide receiver his senior year, the South Carolina coaches once again saw him more as a corner. Maybe due to his height, or lack of speed, or something else, I'm not quite sure. But unlike Rocky River, South Carolina saw him more as a second-tier cornerback, because they already had a flashy 4-star recruit corners, and as Jaire is just a low 3-star, they definitely treated him more as a second fiddle. Someone, in his words, that they did a favor for by giving him an offer. Jaire and his parents were not having it, because they knew his worth, and knew he was worth far more than what they were showing. And they knew if they stuck around, the chances of him playing were going to be small. So through some talk, he actually did talk to the Louisville coach, and apparently it went really well. So well that he committed on the spot without consulting even his parents. This is when his true collegiate story began. When he first transferred to Louisville in 2015, he already started to notice that he'd have to fight to prove his worth once again. No shocker, because at the D1 level, he had some fierce competition. He was competing against sophomore Tremaine Washington, a current CFL player who already had prior experience playing 8 games the previous season with the Cardinals. On the other side, you had Shaq Wiggins, who had real potential to go as far as he wanted and was set as a real impact player coming from Georgia, also a sophomore. So Jaire was competing with guys, both with experience and both hungry to get their starting roles on the defense. And once again, the odds were stacked against Jaire, and he had to dig down deep to overcome yet another hurdle. So after the summer camp, the question had to be asked, where would this leave Jaire? Well, when it was all said and done, it left him not exactly as a backup, but not as a starter either. Jaire's father said this bothered Jaire because whether offense or defense, he was used to at least starting one of the two, and felt that even though he understood that he was new, he definitely could provide more for the team than they were letting him. But Jaire's father gave some sage advice to our boy and told him to just keep working hard and that his time would come because he had the skills, and in his words, the cream will always rise to the top. And he was right, as he was earning respect and shoutouts from fellow teammate and starter Shaq Wiggins during training camps. He was saying how it was impressive that such a relatively young player was keeping up with them in certain drills. And with that, Jaire did get to play. When it was time for the coaches to choose who would get to play, he made the cut in more ways than one. By that I mean he played more than just cornerback. He was also a punt returner, returning 23 returns and got over 200 yards from that. But thanks to the great eyes of the coaching staff, who also snagged talents like Lamar Jackson, who also, fun fact, was a low-star recruit, saw Jaire's potential. It got him to play in 10 games, 12 on their official site, as a cornerback where he started in 2 games and racked up some impressive stats with 19 total tackles, 14 of which being solo, 2 pass deflections, and 1 interception. Overall, a promising season, especially with such limited playing time, but the best was still yet to come. Sophomore season, he was given the title as a true sophomore, and it's unsurprising, as even in different articles before the season even began, surprised everyone when Jaire and Shaq were both listed as possible starters for the cornerback position, when Shaq, the fresh transfer out of Georgia with the most experience out of the two, was expected to start right away on his own. Later on, as the season went underway, Jaire was named the starter in all 13 games and started to make impacts all over the field, when already in his second game he got an interception against Syracuse, which ultimately contributed to their victory over the Orange. And then in the very next game had 1 fumble recovery, 5 total tackles, ran a punt return for 65 yards, and then returned another punt that went viral nationally for a touchdown. He continued to be a menace on the field when in 2 games later, and when playing against the future national champions of the Clemson Tigers, he picked off not 1, but 2 balls from addicted massage lover and protector of all women, Deshaun Watson. And he also forced a fumble as well, all while shutting down Clemson's 2 top wide receivers, Deion Kane and Mike Williams. The performance was so good that it was enough to be ranked number 5 individual performance by an ACC player in 2016. This man finally had the respect and recognition he knew he deserved, and this was just through 5 games, and there was still plenty more to come. 3 games after that stunning performance, he had another breakout game, where he registered 2 interceptions, along with 6 tackles, 1 pass deflected against Virginia. He overall was simply a sensational player and was considered a true shutdown corner to everyone in the NCAA. This season is when he accomplished what he truly wanted to, and that was to be that guy. Ranking number 2 in the ACC all accolades and was considered one of the top cornerbacks in the whole NCAA. He finally made a name for himself, solidified his starting spot, and has a true identity as a player as he made cornerback his own and fully matured into that role. Which must have been such a relief, because whether it was wide receiver or cornerback, he knew he could handle it either way. He just wanted to prove, when given the chance, that he would always be that guy. He just needed to be given that opportunity. And when it was given, there was no going back. He knew this, the team knew this, coaches, fans, they all knew this. Now they all together waited eagerly for the next year to commence, as his junior year promised to be a good one. And with other talented players like Lamar Jackson on the other side of the helm, developing just as well, it is pretty quick to understand why they had the whole nation buzzing at a possible deep playoff run. However, things were planned a little different for Jaire. His junior year, you could tell he finally earned the respect and recognition of everyone that previously paid him no mind. He was named first team All-ACC, and the only other Cardinal to get that was his teammate Lamar Jackson. He was obviously given a starting spot, and now once again, all he wanted to do was go out there and solidify himself a solid pick in the NFL draft. See, this is why, once again, I think of him so fondly. He never went out of his way to cause a commotion for clout, or to be noticed, besides a few funny dances. He did not start out as a genetic freak, or had any connections to NFL coaches to help him with things like diets, workouts, or other special treatment. It was through hard work. From high school to college, it was always him against the best, and it was only up to him to make it happen. And he stuck to his belief that he could do it, and he got what he felt he earned. Now it was time to capitalize before the very real stage of the NFL. But sadly, plans were made a little different for Jaire than what anyone was hoping for. After the season opener against Purdue, Jaire did what Jaire does and was returning a blocked punt.
Which David Blau being one of our Texas guys and a few others.
Dellinger's field goal try of 53 is blocked. Remember, it can be advanced. Jaire Alexander being taken to the sidelines, and he injured himself upon trying to return that blocked field goal. And take a look at it right here, Spence.
You can see here upon impact, you can see that ankle.
Where he sprained his knee and was forced to sit 4 games. He later returned limited, where he re-aggravated the injury and missed 1 more game after that. And then when he finally got out there, he broke a bone in his hand and had to miss another game. He managed to finish the last 3 games, even getting an interception in the process, but also skipped the Tax Slayer Bowl and gave up his senior year. But even with that loss of the season, the last 3 games he still took total advantage of. He totaled 14 tackles, 1 interception, and 4 pass deflections. Though a disappointing bump in the road, it still showed a very promising future for Jaire. I think what would have hurt Jaire more than losing his own personal stats was the anger and frustration of not being able to prove himself this year. Like, of course, when he finally grabs everyone's attention, not because of his work ethic, or his leadership, or his personality, but his actual skill. When he's finally able to have everyone watch what he can do, his body breaks. He doesn't mess up a play, he doesn't mentally lose. His body, something he physically cannot control to a certain degree, it breaks. For a guy like Jaire, that has to be the single most frustrating thing ever, because he's not the kind of guy to fold when the eyes are on him. In fact, he loves the challenge. But not at go when the team is at an all-time strong, and everyone, including the pros, are watching you. That's gotta be the most intense, frustrating feeling ever. But life goes on, and Alexander knew he was going to bounce back. The stage was set, the calls were made, and many saw Jaire going high in the first round, but now only time would tell. Finally, in the first round, 18th pick, Jaire was selected by the Green Bay Packers. I could not imagine. It must have been such a surreal moment. A young kid who just turned 21 a little while before that had to go through so much. Living situations, constantly moving, his little brother dying, trying to get attention from the big schools, all while playing at such a small, unknown school. And then when you finally get to those big schools, trying to get starting time against other more experienced athletes. and then battling an injury on your junior year, yet he managed to do it all. He never gave up and kept pushing, and now he's made it. It was an amazing feeling. Jaire's dad could barely even believe it, yet the one man who got it, Jaire, was less than thrilled. Why? He was more stunned that he did not get chosen higher, and with that he claimed that he would have a chip on his shoulder and he would prove why no matter what, he should have been drafted higher. This story is not over yet, because even though he's in the door and on the field, now he's got to prove that he can stay there. Even in the NFL, he was sticking true to his nature and putting in the work and letting his talent speak for itself, even getting the old head nod from the GOAT. No, not me. Aaron Rodgers himself, and rumor has it, even picking him off once. This, in my opinion, was great for Jaire, because he really did get to go against some of the best in the league in order for he himself to improve. When you got a pass-heavy offense with players like Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers, you know you're in for a tough time. And to get that kind of acknowledgement from the man himself, Aaron Rodgers, means you must have been putting up one heck of a fight. Iron does sharpen iron, after all. Not only players were giving him the head nod, but coaches as well. As Patine put it, if you didn't know who was and just elevated our defense the first 2 weeks, you'd be hard-pressed to say that Jaire is not potentially our top defensive player, if not one or two. Just his efforts, his energy, his playmaking ability, he's been outstanding. But you can get all the compliments you want, but it won't matter when you're faced up against your opponent. Now the true test was about to begin, and it finally gave him what he wanted, a chance to finally prove that not only could he play with the best of the best, but excel even past that. Which he did. He made an insane impact on the field, racking in over 66 tackles, where in one game against the Falcons he went crazy with 10 tackles and caused 2 fumbles. And some would say, well, if they're tackling that much, that means they must not be doing that good. But that's not the case. It's because that man is always running to the ball. Also, quick mention, almost got a full sack, a couple stuffs, an interception, along with 11 total pass deflections. It's insane how fast he was able to make a difference, even in a place like the NFL. He did, however, miss a total of 3 games due to a groin injury, but for this year, it can be overlooked, as his accolades overshadowed any haters or injuries, as he won the PFWA All-Rookie Team and recorded the second most tackles on the team, and was even rated as the cornerback who contested the most catches more than any other CB in the league that year. Jaire was less than satisfied and claimed that he wanted to be a little more dominant than last year's campaign, but this time he would deal with a real bump in the road. The season itself was going well, and he was doing well in his last 4 games. Then the 5th week came against Dallas. They targeted Jaire the whole time that game, and he really did all he could do, getting an interception, even deflecting a couple passes, yet that still does not change the fact that he got 201 yards and 2 touchdowns put on him that game, which meant for the first time in pretty much his whole career, he ultimately lost a matchup. Now many cornerbacks, especially young cornerbacks, would have plenty of excuses to say, or wouldn't even be willing to talk about it in the first place. Yet Jaire offered no excuse. Instead, he owned up to it and said there's no way this game would define him, and he knows he can play better. Plain and simple. And once again, right there, that's why I like him. He acknowledges the good, but when it comes time to acknowledge the bad, he does, and is far more mature about it than most ever would be. Goes to show that he really is not all that cocky, because someone with too much arrogance would never cough up to something like that. But someone with confidence would, because they know it won't happen again, as long as they can help it. Rather have one bad game than get into your head and then make it 10 bad games. He bounced back after said game and quickly carried on to have 17 pass deflections, total 2 interceptions, 58 total tackles, and once again made a great impact for the Packers defense. And even though he did get an injury in their last game against the 49ers in the 2020 NFC Championship, where his team ultimately lost, there was still more to come from Alexander. "2020 was basically the same shtick. He racked up 51 tackles, 1 interception in the regular season, 13 pass deflections, not to mention a sack. Those interception stats may not look like all that much. It is hard to intercept when QBs often refuse to throw the ball your way. He ultimately became a lockdown corner. He became that guy in just his 3rd year in the NFL, and one side of the field is simply ignored due to him being on it. Here's a quote that I like that explains this situation perfectly. His last 3 matchups: the Falcons, Ridley; Buccaneers, Mike Evans; Texans, Fuller. They were targeted a grand total of 7 times, and they did not produce even a single catch. And Jaire still had more to offer that postseason. When they once again made it to the NFC Championship and went up against the Bucs in a heavily debated GOAT. No, not me. Brady. Jaire had to find a way to not just take on Brady, but players like Mike Evans. And during that matchup, he absolutely showed why he deserves to be in this league. He had 3 pass deflections, he recorded 2 interceptions in prime time when the Packers really needed it. And even though they lost that game, Jaire, in my opinion, did not lose, but rather was held back from a win. This man now has officially not just shown that he has talent, but real consistency. Something most young players try to figure out year by year, yet Alexander has shown that he has it down pat. In almost any position of football, but especially defense, you have to accept the risks that are involved. Odds are you will probably be injured one way or another, and usually a player has at least one major injury that could possibly end an entire career. Just look at Ryan Shazier. But when you're someone like Jaire, who's infamous for not shying away from contact, something bad is bound to happen. And sadly, 2021, it came down to just that. In a tragic shoulder injury, he was forced to sit out for the literal rest of the season. And since this was his last year on contract, talks had to be made. Is he worth paying for? Is he worth the raise since he missed a whole year of football? Could he even play football again? In 2022, all the answers to those questions were a yes. And more than that, he is now the highest paid CB in the league at $84 million. Hopefully, though, this injury made him learn, play hard but also smart, especially at a young age. Making sure your body lasts will be vital if you want to keep having successful seasons. And if you're someone like Jaire, simply sitting on the bench and getting a paycheck won't do. It's getting out there and contributing is what makes someone like him the happiest. Overall, I still think he's underrated. I think he is, with no doubt, the best cornerback in the league. It might just be because he's overshadowed by our offensive legends, because to be fair, it is an offensive game nowadays. And when talking with characters like Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, they are bound to take up most of that spotlight. But he is a GOAT in his own right. But like I said, there is more to it all than just football. After that NFL paycheck came, he gave it back to the people who helped him, like the Boys and Girls Club. But he does more than that. He interacts with kids and often donates and participating in community events, doing yoga with his fans. He overall is just a very nice guy who knows what it's like to have nothing. So now that he has everything, he gives back to the people that need it most. He's a great player and even better person. Thank you all for watching. Did you know, according to Pro Football Focus, Alexander allowed a minuscule passer rating of 17.7 when opposing quarterbacks threw at him? That's the lowest rating in the country for cornerbacks. Another fun fact, did you know his high school number was retired? Another fun fact, did you know he wanted to wear number 10 because of Deshaun Jackson? Yep, turns out it was his personal hero, and so was Steve Smith Jr. If you want to know more interesting facts and see more videos, please do not forget to like and subscribe, and tell me who I should talk about next. Sorry this episode took so long, I'm kind of busy with life right now. But thank you all for watching. Once again, please don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment down below. This is the GOAT. Peace!